Good afternoon, everyone. You're now tuned into A Reasonable Conversation on nusound Radio 92 FM. I'm Prerna and I'll be with you to 1 p.m. Hope everyone enjoyed the show last week, which was a lot of fun. I was joined with Burham Singh and Harper Gill from City Sikhs. We had lots of text messages and phone calls, and as always, we'll try and get through as many of them today too. Today, we are very fortunate to have Jo Sidhu QC back on the show. Jo studied politics from Oxford. He did a Masters in International Studies from LSE. He's also been a local councillor in Ealing and has worked for the BBC. He is now a tenant at 25 Bedford Row and is the Vice Chair of the Equality and Diversity Committee at the Bar Council. He also has a lot of experts in terrorism cases, which fits in nicely to what we're talking about today. Hi Jo, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, Prerna. Nice to be back on the show.
Yeah, great to have you back on the show. Just let all our listeners know, if you'd like to speak to us on air, the studio number is 0208 472 9292. You can also text us at 07961 387 787. Right, so today we're going to be talking about extremism. It's something that's very topical. We did see a surge of extremism come up in the media with 9/11 and 7/7, and also with Syria. It's resurfaced again. I think there's been Brits who've been suicide bombers there. So we've heard it come up again, haven't we?
Well, there's been a lot of coverage about events around the world. Obviously, since 9/11, things have been heightened in the minds of the public, and the media have no doubt seen these as very good stories, because it's important to keep everyone aware of what's going on, where there are flashpoints around the globe. And clearly, extremism has become one of the biggest topics of the day. These days, of course, politicians are talking about a number of things that they feel the public are troubled about. They talk about immigration, they talk about crime. And wrapped up within all these issues is, of course, the question of extremist behaviour. Now, extremism, Prerna, comes in many different forms. It could be political extremism.
Yeah, definitely.
It could be religious extremism. There are forms of social extremism. And the real question is for us to consider, I think, today, for the topic that we are discussing, is why do people feel sometimes that they have to adopt methods which others would regard as extreme in order to get their voices heard and to achieve whatever objectives they feel they need to, whether they're motivated by a political ideology or religious ideology. We need to get to the bottom of what's driving these forces through our society. Think about the fact that we've, over the course of the last 50 or 60 years since the Second World War, come to a sort of settlement in the UK that people, generally speaking, all abide by basic values and thinking, such as most of us believe that democracy is the only way to change things. Most of us don't think the way to change things is by using violence. Most of us believe that there are fundamental human rights that we should all be entitled to, such as equality between men and women, and that we should all have the right to vote, that we should be free from state interference, which is arbitrary. We don't think the police should have too much power. They should have enough power to do their job correctly. These are basic values and systems of thinking that the vast majority of people in our country have signed up to. So the real question is, what is it that makes some people sometimes turn to violence or turn to extremism, if it is because they are frustrated with the systems that are in place and they don't think those systems can change things enough or quickly enough? Then they turn to other forms of radicalism. So we need to explore this, because particularly in the Asian community, this is a very sensitive issue. It's not peculiar to one section of the community. Let's emphasize that.
No, definitely. Extremism comes across everywhere.
Quite. And we know, for example, that each of our communities over a period of time have found themselves with pockets inside their community who have turned to violence or extreme ways of behaving. And no one is immune to that. I mean, let's look around the subcontinent. If one thinks about Sri Lanka, people sometimes talk about the Tamil Tigers. And obviously there was a great deal of violence there, but then the Tamil Tigers and those who sympathize with them will say, what about the behavior of the Sinhalese majority in Sri Lanka and the behavior of army and the troops and the government towards the minority Tamil population?
It kind of goes back to that phrase, one man's terrorist is another freedom fighter. Extremism is always relative. And people find it justified sometimes.
Quite. I mean, people used to call Nelson Mandela a terrorist when he was trying to secure rights for black people in South Africa. Others used to call him a terrorist. We all, of course, now looking back on all those years, there is a universal agreement that Nelson Mandela was in fact a freedom fighter. He was someone who genuinely wanted change for a good reason. It was to get equality for his people. When we think back to the Indian independence movement before 1947, all of those leaders, including Gandhi and Nehru and Jinnah, were trying to secure freedom for a country that had been under imperialist rule for a very long time. And they tried to do so through peaceful methods. And eventually they were successful after a long time, in the same way that Mandela was too. So there are ways of transforming society which, in the end, achieve a just outcome, but don't use violence and don't use extremist methods in order to secure those ends. And I think that those of us in this society who feel strongly that, you know, Britain, in spite of all of its problems, in spite of the fact that we still are tackling discrimination and prejudice and phobias that are used by right-wing people who are trying to get their own point of view across for their own political objectives, we feel, most of us, that we are in a good country.
No, definitely.
I'm very proud to be British. I'm very proud that I was born in this country and that I believe in the basic values that this country upholds.
Definitely.
It doesn't mean that my government always acts in a fair way, either here in Britain or abroad. So I need to recognise, as does everyone else, that whilst I'm happy to be living here, I'm not satisfied that we're doing enough sometimes to project the right image for the UK abroad. And this is where we need to think about the sources of grievance and anger that create people who feel that they have to resort to extremist methods in order to get what they feel is fairness for their people.
Definitely. So do you think it's because the UK has a perception at the moment that they're meddling in others' affairs overseas? I mean, the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, and now Britain are trying to go into Syria too, that people are thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not happy about the government doing this. And instead of maybe going through the political process and doing things democratically and peacefully, they're thinking, you know what, I want to do something about this.
I can understand, both from my own experience of having been involved in fighting racism for about 35 years now, in the community in Southall where I was growing up, and through my work these days in various capacities, working for the Society of Asian Lawyers, working within my own organisation, my professional organisation, the Bar, as Vice Chair of the Equality and Diversity Committee, and lots of other things that I've been trying to do over many decades to secure equality and to free us from prejudice and discrimination. And I've had to work through the existing channels, the institutions that we've got, looking at local government, looking at parliament. I have been a local councillor and I've fought for my community as much as I can. My community, of course, isn't just consisting of Asian people, it consists of all the people who live in my community. But the key point here is that we have been working through established democratic channels to effect change. We haven't gone outside that or tried to use violence in order to get change. And believe me, it's been incredibly frustrating sometimes on this long road that I've been travelling on, when you don't get change quickly enough, when you see that there is such an injustice which is taking place, when you hear about racist murders, when you know that sometimes the police are using methods which quite blatantly reveal that they are motivated by considerations of colour or ethnicity or religion. It is incredibly frustrating, and you have to brace yourself, you have to bite your lip sometimes, because what you really are thinking and wanting to say is that this whole system is corrupt, and I really want to change it, and I want to change it now. I haven't got time to wait until there's another election. I can't see myself spending time on the streets campaigning or persuading people to vote a different way. But I'm afraid, Prerna, the system that we have is the best system that we can get. A democratic system is the only way to change things, because if you think about it for a moment, if we started taking the law into our own hands, if we started using force to make change take place, where will it end? Every community will say that my rights have been trampled on. If somebody feels that in some way that they've got a grievance that needs to be resolved and they don't think the British government is going to do it for them, they will eventually resort to tactics that they feel will get their objectives met more quickly. But where does that take them? I've ended up representing people as a barrister in very serious cases involving allegations of terrorism, where young men have found themselves caught up in this sort of mindset that the only way to protect the rights of their brothers and sisters in other lands is by taking up a fight against the British government which is effectively a war by any other name.
Okay.
As a result of that, of course, they've ended up being arrested or they've been brought to justice, and some of them, many of them in fact, get convicted and are now spending years and years and years in jail. And they will not be released until they are in their 60s or 70s. This is a tragedy for their families, for their communities, and ultimately for them. Because in the end, you have to make choices. You choose either to adopt a democratic way of changing things, or you adopt a different technique which will get you into trouble eventually. Because if you think about it for a moment, the balance of power in this country is such that you can't win if you are a terrorist or an extremist. You can't win. The odds are against you. You can create a lot of noise, a lot of disruption, and you can create more victims by your behavior if you believe that bombing your way to victory is the solution. But you can't win, because in the end, Prerna, the majority of people in this country don't want to adopt a different way of living. They abide by the ballot box, they abide by democracy, and although you may end up with a government that you didn't choose, you accept that that is the choice of the majority of people in the country. Now, this doesn't mean that we do nothing, and I'm really genuinely deeply concerned that the grievances that people feel, which are legitimate grievances, are addressed more seriously by our government and by governments abroad. And this really is where you started when you talked about what has been going on abroad in Syria and in other countries like Iraq, where people here feel that the behavior of our government was unjustified. Now, this is really a very serious question, but I don't want to make this a question only about one community, because I know, and you know, Prerna, that there are many communities that have grievances. The Northern Irish Catholic community at one point were sympathetic, if not supportive, of the IRA. We've now moved beyond that, and we've got a peace settlement in Northern Ireland. We've mentioned the Tamil Tigers, and of course Tamils who were oppressed in Sri Lanka felt that the Tamil Tigers, represented their interests. Sikhs who feel deeply aggrieved about Operation Blue Star in 1984, when the Indian troops went into the Golden Temple and so much was destroyed of that very sacred place. And then subsequently, months later in November, after Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her bodyguards, the reaction of extremist Hindus in New Delhi, who were whipped up by local politicians there, to slaughter so many thousands of Sikh people in revenge attacks because of the fact that their Prime Minister had been killed by 2 Sikh bodyguards, has left Sikh people in this country. Remember, I myself am from a Sikh background. They feel still that these are unresolved questions, and there are still questions in Parliament to do with all of that.
Definitely.
So there are lingering grievances that each community will say are important enough for them to take action about. The question is, what sort of action and how?
Exactly, because one set of extremists then make more extremists as well. I mean, you did mention Golden Temple. There were clashes that went on between Hindu and Sikhs, and that in turn has kind of made a movement of Sikh extremists too. So unfortunately, it's like a kind of spiral. One group does something, the other one, grows extremists and retaliates. I mean, just going to read out a couple of text messages. We've got a text message from Sonny who said, some people think that they have an affinity with people in other countries if they are the same religion. I mean, that's something you mentioned earlier, that if you have brothers and sisters abroad and you have some sort of kinship with them, you think it's your duty to protect them. So then you kind of take the cause up upon yourself to go and do something.
So just if I can on that one, Prerna, that's such an important issue. Because, when you come from the Asian community settled in this country, inevitably you're still going to have very strong links with families and relatives and friends abroad in the countries of origin of your parents or yourself. So there will always be a natural affinity and understanding and feeling for what is going on in those other countries, whether it's India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, in East Africa, anywhere that you came from, you will still be interested. Secondly, this is the really fundamental question that I think Sunny's referring to, is what is it that you feel identifies yourself as a human being first and foremost? Is it your religion? If it's your religion, then obviously you will feel that if there is the murder of people of your religion taking place abroad, you want to do something about it. Now, clients that I have been representing, some of those clients were motivated by, initially, what was happening with Bosnian Muslims. Bosnian Muslims were slaughtered in the most horrible way, in ethnic violence. Then we talk about what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq, what happens and has been happening in Palestine for a very long time to the people who lived there who were displaced. these things affect your emotional state. They make you angry because you feel helpless sitting in London or in Sheffield, anywhere in this country. You feel that you want to do something, and emotions are aroused. And if you begin to see this as an issue about your religion first and foremost, then naturally your sympathies are going to be across the world with communities that you have no other connection with, except for the fact that you share the same religion. All right? Now, how do I think of myself? How do I wish other people thought of themselves first and foremost? I am someone who's basically secular in his outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I don't guide my life according to religious principles, but I respect the fact that others may wish to do that.
Okay.
I see myself first and foremost as a British citizen. My loyalty is to this country. It's where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
My loyalty is to everyone in this country, including people of my own background, but others as well. So when things go on abroad, my first instinct is to ask, what is my country doing? Is it doing the right thing or is it doing the wrong thing?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, being someone of a certain background religiously, I will always feel that if Sikhs are being treated badly in India, I'm going to have an extra sense of grievance about that because that's the religion of my forefathers, all right? And I can understand why, for example, young Muslim men feel that if other Muslims across the world are being maltreated, are being killed, are being murdered, that they themselves will feel a very deep sense of grievance and frustration and want to do something about it. But my appeal to everyone is this: if you live in this country and you live by the basic value systems of this country, which are equality, freedom of speech, the rights of human beings to do what they like without interference from the state, then you must understand that the only way that you're going to change anything is through democratic means. Remember, we've been through this before many times. Martin Luther King believed in peaceful change. He was inspired by the independence activists in India.
Yeah.
Malcolm X, on the other hand, who was an incredibly intelligent man and understood his community very well, said, by all means necessary, this was his expression, by all means necessary, we will effect change, which means, if necessary, by violence.
Okay.
And as human beings, we have to make a decision. Are we human beings first and foremost? Or are we to be defined by our religion or by our political ideology before anything else? And I think that if you're going to have a society that's stable and where people can live together in peace, in harmony, then the first thing you must say to yourself is, I am a human being before I am anything else. And all the great religions of this world have taught that message. You are a human being. You must love your neighbor. You must care about other people. That,
Definitely.
above everything else, is the most important guiding way of having your life, whether you're here, in India, Pakistan, anywhere else. That's the most important thing.
We've got a couple of texts in. We've got a text from Ramesh. He said, do not bring your grievances in this country. Your priority should be the country you live in, which is just what we were talking about. It's true. I mean, we're British first. We're living here, so we should respect the country we live in. We've also got a text from Feroz who said, the foreign policies of UK are creating extremists in our midst, which I think was what we're talking about as well. I mean, British foreign policy. Does it breed terrorists?
Undoubtedly, the foreign policy of this country, in terms of decisions our government has taken in our name to do things in other countries, affects how people feel here.
Definitely.
The Iraq War was a huge mistake. It was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. It resulted in the deaths of millions of people.
And it had no legal basis either.
It had no legal basis, and therefore it was an illegal war. But it was done in the name of this country.
Yeah.
And it has caused the deaths of women, children, and innocent men who have been slaughtered in the course of a war that should not have taken place. Now, what happens when you start a war like that? You can't be surprised if people are going to get angry. And it's not just Muslims who got angry about the Iraq War. Just remember.
There was a huge backlash from everyone.
There were a
Protests.
million people marching in London against the Iraq War who came from every colour and every religion and every ethnic group. It was not about the fact that Iraqis were Muslims and it was wrong that Muslims should be slaughtered. It was a humanistic objection. It was about people saying these are human beings who are not deserving of being killed by American and British planes, bombing them. This is wrong. And so what I say to people is, when you're living in a country like this, which allows you freedom of expression, and remember, not all countries do.
Exactly.
Syria does not allow freedom of expression. In Saudi Arabia, you do not have freedom of expression. You don't even have freedom of religion.
Definitely.
This is a country which allows those things. And so we want people to demonstrate. We want people to protest. We want people to exercise their civil rights to object to what their government is doing, but to do so with peaceful means. Because if you take it any other way, it will lead to one road and one road only. And that is anarchy and chaos, because everybody will jump up and say, well, if we're going to start bombing because we have a grievance, then we want to start bombing as well because we also have a grievance, which is different. And we don't think it's fair that the government of our country should get away with the way that they're behaving. But the minute, if you think about it, Brad, the minute you start going down that road, where will it end?
Exactly. But some people do think that, you know, as you mentioned before, doing the kind of democratic, peaceful means, it does take a lot of time and effort, and it's a really slow process. So people think, you know what, if I kind of scare the government, then they might be fearful of what the reaction might be to something that they're going to later on decide upon.
Or alternatively, as what has happened in the last number of years, the decision by some people to adopt more extremist methods has done nothing other than to make the government even more stubborn in its position. It hasn't actually achieved the objective that was intended, which was to make the government back off. The government now continues to operate a foreign policy, which some people don't like. Whether you object or you don't object, what the government's doing in Afghanistan and the US government too, and other countries, and what it's doing elsewhere, and potentially will be doing in Syria. These are flashpoints around the world which get people very agitated. And the question is, what do? You're not going to bomb your way into changing a government's policy. It will not happen. History has taught us that all terrorist groups that have sought to force change through a society by intimidating their government have failed. Nothing in this country has ever changed because of bullets or bombs. Things only change if you're able to win the argument and get through democratic means your agenda on the table. Now, as Asian people, we have such a broad talent of spokesmen and spokeswomen who come from all backgrounds, who are able to advance the arguments that people want to hear ventilated in public. They can do it. When you switch on your television and you listen to Question Time or Newsnight or the news generally, you will see now Asian commentators coming on and expressing their viewpoint freely. Those people are in a position to change people's minds through argument. Argument has always been, even with all our great religions, the best way to effect change.
Definitely.
Our great religions, whether it's Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, have had a history of great thinkers who believe that it is through argument and discourse and discussion that you come to a closer understanding of the truth. You cannot impose your truth on anyone.
Exactly, and by winning over people's minds and hearts, that in turn will kind of make them think differently.
Yes, and we have enough success stories in history as well of good change being brought about through peaceful means. And the independence of India and Pakistan is a very good example of that. We achieved the liberation of that subcontinent without going to war with the British. Martin Luther King made the biggest change to the way in which Americans think about their racial politics in post-war history. He was responsible for that change because he did so believing that peace was the only way forward. And although I know and I understand that some people will hear this and say, well, it's easy for him to say that. It's easy for him to say peace is the only way forward because he doesn't appreciate how we feel about what is going on to our brothers and sisters abroad. I say to those people, if you think about where you're taking this, if you feel that that is the only way forward, what do you think is the end game? Because the end game will not be that all of the people in Britain, particularly all of the white people in Britain, are going to turn around one day and say, we agree. We agree that your point of view is the only point of view. They won't.
It'll just alienate that group further.
You want to take those people with you. You want to change British foreign policy? Whether you're a Sikh or a Hindu or a Muslim or a Jew or whoever you are, if you want to change British foreign policy, take the people with you. Argue your case without making them afraid of you. Bring them on board by making them understand the force and logic and rationale of your argument that human rights are important to protect. And if you believe in human rights irrespective of your color and religion, then you as a white person, you would say, will feel the same pain that I feel when I see children lying on the street dead in Iraq and in other countries where people are being killed mercilessly and without justification. You will feel that same pain. That is what our great religions have taught us. That is what our great political leaders have taught us. That the pain that we feel when others suffer harm is the pain of a human being for another human being. Not for a Sikh for another Sikh, not for a Muslim for another Muslim, but for one human being for another. And if we start with that system of thinking and we end with that system of thinking, then I genuinely believe, with all those good examples from history that I just mentioned, that we can make change and we can make it happen and make it permanent. But we need to take people with us.
Definitely. And on that positive note, we're going to have a short ad break. If anyone would like to speak on air with us, the studio number is 0208 472 9292. You can also text us on 07961 387 787. And you can also tweet us at nusound92FM.
Hi, this is Satish. Join myself, Prerna and Vivek for a reasonable conversation. Every Sunday between 12 and 1 o'clock here on Nusound 92 FM. We explore controversial, non-controversial, but important topics that affect our community.
Welcome back to a reasonable conversation on New Sound Radio 92 FM. We've been talking about extremism with Jo Sidhu QC. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I think we have a caller on the line. Hello?
Hello there.
Hi.
I just want to thank you. It's a very good program.
Oh, thank you very much. So what's your name? Is it Durga Das?
Yeah, and he's doing very well.
Oh, thank you very much, Durga Das.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, it's so he's doing very well. So there's nothing I can add.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for your call.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Durga Das. Bye. We've also had a text in during the ad break. The text is from Jaspal. He said, the sorry episode of 1984 was very unfortunate and amends have been made and compensation has been given. There is a Sikh Prime Minister. When will it end? There's no point in whipping up hatred when in India all the Sikhs and Hindus get on well and lots of intermarried. I mean, do you think people are out there for themselves? That's why this whole extremism exists, because
this is a very important question, Prerna, because what we've spent time talking about so far, of course, are the genuine grievances that people feel. And these are not made-up grievances. You know, when you hear about what happened against Sikh people in New Delhi in November of 1984, and the slaughter that took place, people being dragged out of their houses and murdered and raped and all of those other things, you feel that, look, this is not something that can be brushed under the carpet. People want to have justice. When Muslims feel that they have seen the treatment of other Muslims across the world in such a way that brings shame upon us as human beings, they want to feel that justice is done. When black people who went through slavery for hundreds of years have never really had any reparation made to them for the injustices which they suffered, they too feel that their concerns and their grievances have been brushed under the carpet. Now, everyone will feel, each community will feel, whoever you are, that historically things have happened to your people which need to be addressed and recognized. And the first point is this, is that the powers that be, those who either were in power at the time or who are in power now, need to publicly recognize and accept and apologize for injustices which have taken place. Many people today who feel grievance are looking for some recognition from their government that something bad has happened. And when the government refuses to say that openly, all it does is antagonize people even more. And this is what drives otherwise moderate people into the arms of extremists. So there are two things. One, recognition of injustice, which is made publicly. Secondly, justice being done and being seen to be done, whether it's done by way of an inquiry or compensation to the families who lost members of their families in violence and murder. But there must be some recognition of this. So one of the things that I am particularly interested in and concerned about is this. We all have reasons to feel unhappy, but there are those amongst us who exploit that feeling and use it for their own political or religious ends. If young men are upset and young women are upset about what has happened to their religious community, there will always be a few people out there ready, willing and able to take advantage of that and lead them into a road which will take them nowhere ultimately, except perhaps a prison.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I'm really, really interested in is what is happening with our younger people. whether it's on the streets, in our communities, or in university campuses, what is happening to our younger people? What I have noticed, as everyone has noticed, is a trend towards increasing radicalization. And it doesn't matter which religion you're from. I'm seeing it in every religion, actually.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, Prerna, I grew up, as I've told you, in Southall.
Yeah.
And as a boy who was brought up in Southall, which was a multicultural community in which Asian people had a very good presence, the one thing I always remember about my childhood was that I didn't have any real awareness about other people's religion. Now, some people may say, oh, that's unfortunate. I say, actually, that was a very good thing. In my classroom, as a child, I was sitting next to a Muslim child on my right, a Hindu child on my left, a Christian child on the other side of the table, black children, white children, Asian children. And we didn't think about what our religious identity was. We thought about the fact that we are children enjoying our childhood and enjoying the learning experience in the school, where no one felt intimidated and no one felt that they were different. And I look now, all these years on, and I chair a school governing body. In fact, it's my old school governing body in Southall, where I've been chair now for the last 17 years, and I've had a chance to see how children's attitudes are changing under the influence of their parents. And what I've noticed is, and I feel this is a sad development, is more and more children are beginning to define themselves first and foremost by their religion.
Mm-hmm.
Not by the fact that they are citizens of this country or simple human beings sharing a space and a life with other kids. They are defining themselves by their religion, and this is creating an atmosphere in our schools where each religion then begins to have a tit-for-tat game, where if one religion becomes more vocal and more visible, other religions feel defensive and they start retreating into their own religion and saying, well, now we feel a little bit threatened, we should start asserting our own religious identity. I don't believe my parents came to Britain for that.
Definitely not.
I think my parents came to Britain because my parents wanted to have a better education system for their children and to have better economic fortunes for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They came to this country because they believed this country was basically secular, that this country believed itself that religion had no great part to play in the lives of people, that if you wanted to go into education, religion shouldn't be there. If you wanted to go into the National Health Service, religion shouldn't be there. If you wanted to join the police force or go into the civil service, religion shouldn't be there. That is not what a good society should be about. A good society should allow and encourage people to express their religious freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
They should allow them to do that, but those religious freedoms occupy a space which is essentially a private space. What religion you practice is something that comes from your home, from your parents, and everyone should be free to express their religious feelings. But when it comes to parts of society which should be basically religious-free zones, my own view is we should preserve that. We should celebrate that. What is good about Britain is that we have the freedom to be free.
No, definitely.
You've got to understand that when you join a public service, you're joining it as a citizen, not as a member of a religion. And if you think differently, one has to start asking the question, what is the sort of society that you want to live in? If you want to live in a society, and there are many such societies around the world, Israel is essentially a Jewish society, was created to create a space and a home for Jewish people. Pakistan was a place that was created so that Jinnah could have a safe haven for Muslim people who he was fearful would be hurt or killed in a united India.
Well, now there's more Muslims in India than in Pakistan.
Well, the point is that if you want to live in a theocratic state, as we call it, which is based on your religious identity, there are many places you can go and live like that.
No, definitely. I mean, you did mention that Britain is a secular state and we should be humans first and foremost instead of identifying ourselves with religion. But there have been lots of religious schools popping up, and unfortunately religious leaders do teach kids in some of these religious schools that their religion comes first and everything else comes second, and it's their duty to kind of promote their religion. And also, you also said that religion is something that's private. Lots of people kind of try and show off and get, one above everyone else. Like, look how religious I am. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. You're not doing this. And then it kind of becomes like a competition, like who's more religious than the other person.
The reason why this is going on, we need to understand. People from certain religious backgrounds feel insecure. When you see things happening around the world, and you think that your religion is being targeted because of the religion and not because of anything else, you'll begin to feel insecure, you'll begin to feel defensive. So you'll want to see more religious schools, whichever religious school it happens to be. And I've seen every type of religious school set up in this country. You'll want to build more temples, more mosques, more gurdwaras, because you want to feel that you are protecting your religion. Okay? But I think everyone needs to stand back and take a deep breath and ask themselves, why am I living here?
Yeah.
Why am I living in England? Why am I living in Scotland? Why do I live in this country? I live here because I like this country. I choose to live here. I'm not forced to live here. I want to live here because I can express myself freely, because I have more economic prospects for my children, my family, because my children can get a better education. I like the fact, actually, even though I don't openly admit it, people might say, that this is actually a liberal country.
Yeah.
I like that freedom. Now, if there are others amongst us who have an agenda of their own to whip up hysteria, to make people feel more radicalized because they have their own program is to impose a system of thinking upon this society or any other society, one has to appeal to those who are listening to them. Ask yourselves, is that really what you want? Because if that's really what you want, Prerna, there are places you can go and live like that. You don't have to impose it here. You can go and live in another country that operates by theocratic principles. No doubt. Just get on a plane or make the application and emigrate. But if you choose to live here, it is important to say it out loud that you are signing up for a moderate society. You're signing up for a society which is basically secular, which doesn't teach that religion should inform the way you behave in public life. This is a society which says you should be involved in your community, but not on a religious basis primarily, but because you're a good citizen who cares about their neighbour.
But unfortunately, those people, who do listen or do, get brainwashed are young and vulnerable, and they can't necessarily make that decision that, I'm living in a liberal, free, democratic society. I'm actually really lucky. They just because all they hear are these negative things that are happening to their community.
And that is because, Prerna, there are people out there who set themselves up as leaders. They are self-appointed. They're not elected by their communities or democratically appointed. They are self-styled leaders who think that they have the right to decide what people should think about their own religion, and they have the right to decide that religion is more important than any other form of identity. And I say to younger people who come under their influence, be vigilant. Ask yourself about these so-called leaders. Are they really there because they care about the religion, or have they got their own program that they're trying to prosecute? And they're trying to suck you into it so that you eventually become a scapegoat. You eventually become fodder for them. You won't see these religious leaders putting their lives on the lines.
No, definitely
You
not.
won't see them going out and doing the things they tell young people to do, to go and join battles abroad. They don't do that because they're not stupid. Those religious leaders know that they've got other younger, more gullible people to do that sort of dirty work for them, and they will send them out and do that. So what I'm going to say is this. There are listeners out there, many listeners out there, who contribute to their communities, who have done things, leadership, and they've been instrumental in changing their communities. I want those people to think, am I saying enough out loud? Am I speaking up? Am I speaking up for our community? Am I speaking up for our country? Because we cannot go on like this. When bad things happen and white English people start pointing the finger and blaming our communities for what is happening, we need to stand up and say it out loud that these extremists do not represent the mainstream of thinking. They don't represent me. That's what we need to say, that I don't believe in that. But we have a situation right now, Prerna, where people are scared to speak out, because what extremists have done is they've managed to dominate the debate so as to make moderate people look like they are the ones who are strange. If you speak up in favor of moderation, if you speak up for basic human rights these days, which have got nothing to do with religion, you will find that others, and it doesn't matter who these others are, they come from all religions, will say to you, well, you're a traitor.
Exactly.
You're not one of us. You're betraying your religion by saying these things, and you are affiliated with white people, and really that's where your heart is. You are a coconut or whatever else.
Exactly, and they get ostracized from their own community, so they have to kind of bite their tongue and just go along with it.
But we need to be brave, Prerna. We need to stand up and we need to say these things. And what do we actually believe in?
No, definitely. I mean, we've got a couple of text messages. Ali from Upton Park said some communities feel that they need to be led by leaders. These leaders are not always right. We've also got a text from Navjot who said, when I came to this country in the early 70s, we all had mixed friends. We went to the pubs and clubs together. nowadays youth will only go to Asian clubs and will only go to Bhangra gigs, and they'll look down on someone who's married to an English person or someone else. I mean, it's true. It's what we were talking about last week.
Isn't it ironic, Prerna, that after 50 or 60 years of settlement in this country, rather than having become more part of the societies that we live in, we're now finding ourselves retreating to these little caves which are defined by our religion. That we're not going out there and saying we want to participate in mainstream society, we want to become politicians, we want to become professionals, we want to become community leaders and serve everyone. What we have now are people saying to themselves, actually the safe place for me to be is in the arms of my religious community. How sad that is, that after all these years, the vision that our parents had of their children getting on in society and being full players in this society has become corrupted by those who say, no, let's go backwards in time. Let's define ourselves by something which is ancient, rather than the modern concept of your own humanity being your first defining characteristic, and your loyalty to your country, which you choose to not just live in, but to remain in. I think we need to seize the middle ground back from those who have come to dominate this debate and say, you don't speak for us. We speak for ourselves, and we don't need your so-called leadership, because we know what your agenda is. We know what your game is. We know what you really want to achieve, which is not even justice for Muslims or Sikhs. What you're trying to achieve is power. Power for yourself, so that you can become the self-adorned leaders of our generation. So you can hold on to that power and dictate how things should be. I think young people should stand up and say, we don't need you, actually.
No,
we're educated, we've been to schools here, we can think for ourselves, thank you very much, and we can read books if we want to. You don't tell us what we believe in, we tell ourselves.
Because unfortunately these leaders are given a platform, they speak the loudest, and if people didn't necessarily give them a platform or listen to them, they wouldn't have that much power. So it's about taking the power back and saying, we're not going to listen to you, you're not right. I mean, we can all live in an integrated society, and we shouldn't look down on people from our own community who are different or who speak out.
The next time that somebody from our community speaks up against extremism and speaks up in favor of being inclusive, of having everyone sharing equal rights, I would like to hear others feel emboldened by that, feel encouraged by that, and stand up and say, do you know what? I agree with that guy. Do you know what? I agree with that woman. I'm going to support that person. Don't leave them isolated, because the difficulty we have these days is that too many people who should be speaking up have become silenced. They are afraid. They're afraid of repercussions, of a backlash. They're afraid of being even attacked themselves. And this wouldn't be the first time that moderate people have spoken up and found themselves actually being attacked, even murdered, for expressing views of moderation. And I want to ask all those people listening out there in the community, the next time you hear someone saying, I don't actually believe that what that guy did abroad is in my name, I disown that sort of behavior, then support that person. Go and say to that person, or say it out publicly, actually I agree with him, I agree with her. Make that person feel that they stood up and took a risk for themselves that was worth taking. Don't make them feel as though they're on their own.
Definitely. We've got a text in from Harry. He said the world spent $1,735 billion on war in 2012. It would take approximately $135 billion to totally eradicate poverty. Well, that's a shocking figure. I mean, we spend so much on war overseas when actually we can help humans eradicate poverty.
Every great religion has taught us, hasn't it, that it is important to help the poor. Every great religion says that when you have some power, when you have something that you can share, you should share it. Religions don't teach you to be selfish.
Definitely.
Can we please find a way of getting that message back, so that it's not one of looking after someone's agenda? It's about actually going out in your communities and saying, what can I do to help? I've spent my life trying to help people, Prerna. Okay? These are things that you do if you're brought up in a certain way to believe that service of your community is the most important thing. And it's not to do with your religion. It's to do with your humanity. If you feel people are in need, go out and help them. Don't choose to help people just because they share your religion. Help them because they're human beings. And stand up for what is right. If this community station can do anything positive to help good community relations, it is to encourage ordinary people to speak up and speak out and say, I want to live in a society that is inclusive, not one that's defined by my religion or my political ideology or anything else.
Because, I mean, we're all human beings at the end of the day, so we should look to each other as fellow human beings regardless of colour, religion or gender. I think that's really important, so hopefully more people will follow that message and not, fall into this trap of extremism. We've got a text in from Suraj from Ilford. He said people who live in the UK do not know how lucky they are, which is true, because, I mean, we do criticise the government a lot sometimes, and sometimes unfairly, when we look at, you know, governments overseas which don't actually allow you to even protest, as you mentioned before. I mean, we're really, you know, quite well off here.
We're very fortunate to live in this society, but this society is not perfect, okay? So we don't say, thank you for letting us live here. What we say is, we're very happy to be here. Now let's make it as better as we can. Let's improve it. And that means putting pressure on our government, but doing it through the right channels. Let's get our young people into local councillor positions. Let's get them into Parliament as MPs. Let's get them into the Lords. Let's make them start dictating what the agenda should be, so that all human rights are protected and cherished.
Definitely. And on that great note, unfortunately we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for being here. It's been great talking to you, and hopefully the community will take your wonderful words of wisdom on board.
I look forward to speaking to you again sometime.
Thank you very much. On the next show, we'll be joined with Satish and Vivek, and we'll be talking about modernisation of developing countries. So do tune in, same time, same place next week.